Hello again. It does not seem all that long ago that the British Secretary of State for Education, an Iraqi called Nadim Zahawi, was declaring that there should be no politicised teaching in British schools. There has evidently been a U-turn, and the idea now is that the Department for Education is very keen on explaining to children about the situation in Ukraine and encouraging them to ask their parents for money to help Ukraine. This is a turnabout and no mistake. A number of parents are very worried about this because they do not want their children to be scared and distressed by being taught about a war which is currently being waged. Unfortunately for them, the Department for Education has now revamped its website and Facebook page in the national colours of the Ukrainian flag and has a heading stating that the UK stands with Ukraine. In the description to this video I give a link to the Department for Education's Facebook page, and viewers can see for themselves this extraordinary display. More to the point, by scrolling down a little, they will find the ministry endorsing the so-called schools appeal, in which children are being urged to come to school wearing blue and yellow clothing next Wednesday and to contribute £1 each to the Ukrainians. The Department for Education is also suggesting that sponsored walks and cake sales might be held to raise more money. There are 2 points to be made about this strange business. The first is, of course, that most school children have been scared out of their wits for the last couple of years by the COVID business. Is it really necessary to start frightening them again now by talking about a war which is raging? Not only does that not sound brilliant for their mental health, a lot of them have fallen behind terribly with their education because of the lockdowns. Can they really now afford to waste a day's education by fooling around in this way about Ukraine? Secondly, these children are too young to properly appreciate the ins and outs of the conflict. They're not going to be taught about NATO's bombing of Belgrade a few years ago and the steps by NATO which have led to this confrontation. Instead, they will be presented with a simplified propaganda view which can be summed up as Ukraine good and Russia bad. This very much puts me in mind of the scenes in 1984 when the children are urged to hate the people of Eurasia or East Asia. Do we really want our children to be exposed to a one-sided view of a complex geopolitical struggle as presented by a government led by our current Prime Minister? The thumbnail to this video shows the campaign picture from this fundraising business which the ministry is supporting and helping to advertise. I have never heard of such a thing in British schools, at least not since the Second World War. By the by, the war is making for some very strange bedfellows. The Daily Mail is usually dead set against refugees and asylum seekers being allowed into this country, but they've now changed their tune, and it seems that the more refugees admitted to Britain now, the better. In the same way, the Labour Party has been bitterly opposed to any sort of war for a long time now, and yet they are among the most gung-ho about fighting for the Ukrainians. The refugee business, by the way, is going to cause huge problems in the future, but then I suppose that nobody is currently looking further than the next week or so. The latest proposal is that anybody with a Ukrainian passport should be able to enter Britain and stay for at least a year. During that time they will be entitled to social security benefits and the NHS service, and also have a right to work. I wonder if anybody else can see how the arrival of 250,000 people in this way in the next few months might place a little pressure on hospitals, GPs, schools, housing and so on. Nobody see that? Well, I suppose it must just be me then.